I watched them board first class while I stood in economy, my parents laughing, oblivious. I'd helped, paid, worked, but I was always the afterthought. When I walked away, I knew something big was coming. What followed will change everything. My parents said they couldn't afford to take me on vacation. I saw my sister's kids in first class. I didn't say a word, but a week later, they weren't smiling anymore. I've always been the other sibling, not the golden child, not the one who gets praised at family dinners, just there. My sister Sarah, on the other hand, was the shining star, the perfect daughter, the loving wife, the doting mother of 2 precious children, the one my parents always bent over backward for. And I? I was Daniel, the responsible one, the one who didn't ask for much, the one who worked hard, paid his bills, and, unfortunately, always seemed to have extra money when someone in the family needed it. It started small. "Danny, could you help with the electricity bill this month?" My mom had asked once. "Your father and I are a little tight." I had just started my first real job, and I was happy to help. Then, my sister needed a little help too. "Liam needs braces, and it's just so expensive." "I wouldn't ask, but I know you're doing well," she sighed over the phone. And so it went, helping with bills, covering unexpected repairs, chipping in for my niece and nephew's school supplies. "You're so lucky, Danny," my mom would say with a smile. "You don't have all these responsibilities like Sarah does." Lucky. That's what they called it. I told myself it was fine. It's family after all. And besides, I wasn't struggling, I had no wife, no kids, no massive expenses. But there was one thing I had always wanted, to travel. I had dreamed about it for years, saving up, looking at destinations, imagining myself exploring places I had only seen in pictures. Yet somehow, every time I got close, something came up, a family emergency, an unexpected expense, a guilt trip. So when I finally booked my dream trip to Italy, paying for every cent myself, I told no one. It was my one selfish act, or so I thought. I was at the airport waiting in the economy boarding line, feeling that mix of nervous excitement and exhaustion that came with international travel. Then I heard my sister's voice. "No, Liam, put your backpack down, the seats are huge. You don't need all that stuff." I turned my head and my breath caught in my throat. Sarah, my niece and nephew, my parents all standing in the priority boarding line, laughing, relaxed, wearing matching vacation outfits. First class. For a second, I thought I had lost my mind. My parents, who couldn't afford a trip for me, my sister, who always claimed they were struggling. I took a slow breath. Maybe they saved up for this. Maybe it was some kind of miracle. Then I heard my mom laugh. "Oh, I still feel bad we couldn't take Danny," she said, shaking her head. "Please," Sarah snorted. "He wouldn't have fit in." Laughter. A pit formed in my stomach. I clenched my jaw, turning away as the attendant called their group for boarding. I didn't say a word. I just watched them walk into first class, completely unaware that I had seen everything. And in that moment, something inside me changed. I didn't text them. I didn't call. For the first time in my life, I let the silence sit. Normally, I was the one checking in, the one asking if they needed anything, the one making sure my parents weren't struggling. But this time, nothing. And it felt good. My trip to Italy was everything I had dreamed of, walking through ancient streets, drinking espresso at tiny cafes, standing in front of the Colosseum, knowing I had made this happen for myself. I should have been happy. And I was. But at night, when I sat on my hotel balcony watching the city lights flicker, I kept replaying that moment at the airport. He wouldn't have fit in. The words echoed in my head, scratching at something deep inside me. It wasn't even about the money. Not really. It was the realization that my family never saw me as one of them. They had been laughing at me. I wasn't their priority. I wasn't even an afterthought. The days after everything fell apart were a blur of small, quiet moments. I spent the first few weeks in a haze, sorting through the wreckage of my life. My apartment, now empty of Harrison's things, felt both like a sanctuary and a tomb. It was my space, my refuge, but it also echoed with the memories of everything I had given up. I had no idea what came next. I had no idea how to begin rebuilding after all the betrayal and the loss. But I knew I couldn't stay in the past. I had to keep moving forward. A week after I left the apartment, I found myself back at work. I had to make a living, after all. But everything felt different. My mind wandered during meetings. My eyes would wander to the clock, and I'd wonder how long I could keep pretending that things were fine. I wanted to give up on the corporate world entirely, but I knew that wasn't a solution. I had built something for myself, even if it wasn't what I thought it would be. I kept telling myself that I needed to focus on the long-term goals, the bigger picture. The first time I saw Harrison in person after everything, it was unexpected. I was at a coffee shop near the office, working on a proposal for a new project, when he walked in. He didn't see me at first, but when he did, his face paled. I saw the regret, the guilt, the same things I had felt for weeks, but they meant nothing now. I didn't even flinch when he came over to my table. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice tentative. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him, taking in his defeated posture, the man who had once been my partner. The man who had betrayed me. "Why?" I asked finally. "What is there to say?" He looked down, then back up at me. His eyes were heavy with shame. "I messed up. I didn't see it until it was too late. I just want a chance to make things right. I should have told him to leave. I should have told him to get out of my life. But instead, I just nodded." "Okay," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "But on one condition." He nodded eagerly, not sure what to expect. "Anything. You leave me alone," I said. "And you let me go." He opened his mouth to protest, but I held up my hand. "You don't get to drag me back in. You don't get to pretend like everything is fine. I'm done, Harrison. For real." His face fell. He didn't say anything. Just turned and walked out, his shoulders slumped. I didn't feel relieved. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel anything. I just felt empty. But it was a different kind of empty. It wasn't the hollow ache of betrayal anymore. It wasn't the weight of pretending to be something I wasn't. It was a quiet, peaceful emptiness. I kept moving forward. I worked on my business, spent time with friends who didn't judge me or guilt-trip me. I began to rebuild my life, piece by piece. I focused on things that made me happy: photography, reading, hiking, traveling. I found joy in the little things again. But even as I started to heal, there was still a nagging feeling in the back of my mind. A question I couldn't shake: would I ever be able to trust again? Could I let anyone in? The pain of the past still haunted me, even as I moved forward. The months went by, and I continued to rebuild. I kept to myself mostly, focusing on my work and my passions. But one day, unexpectedly, I received a message from an unknown number. It was Harrison. He had written, "I know you don't want to hear from me, but I need to apologize again. I need you to know I'm sorry. I will always regret what I did, but I understand if you never want to speak to me again." I stared at the message for a long time. The temptation to respond was there, but I knew better now. I knew that I didn't need closure from him. I didn't need him to apologize to feel like I had worth. I had already done that for myself. I didn't respond. Instead, I deleted the message and put the phone down. And for the first time in months, I felt completely in control. I had taken back my life. And it felt damn good. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would be moments when I doubted myself. There would be moments when I questioned my choices. But I knew one thing for sure: I was finally free. Weeks went by and the sharpness of the pain started to fade, but the scars were still there. Some days, it was like everything was back to normal. I kept up with my work, my side projects, and the things that made me feel alive. I spent weekends hiking, catching up with friends, reading books I'd been putting off for too long. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I felt like I had regained a piece of myself I thought I had lost. But as I began to settle into this new life, one I had built without Harrison, there were moments where I couldn't escape the question: what if I was wrong? What if I had overreacted? What if I had ended something that could have been fixed? Every now and then, a pang of doubt would strike, gnawing at the edges of my resolve. The idea of going back, of forgiving him, of letting him back in, would creep into my thoughts like a dark shadow. I didn't let myself entertain it for long. I didn't need to be back in the relationship that had trapped me for so long. I had done the right thing, even if it meant enduring moments of uncertainty. Even if it meant walking away from the person I had once loved. And then, one Saturday morning, I was sitting at a cafe near my apartment when I ran into someone who would change everything. I was scrolling through emails on my phone, sipping on a cappuccino, when a voice called out my name. "Eric?" I looked up, surprised, and there she was, Lily. She was an old friend from college, someone I hadn't seen in years. We had been close once, back when everything seemed simpler, when we both had dreams of escaping the small town we had grown up in. She had been the one to introduce me to photography, one of the things I had rediscovered after everything with Harrison. She was a bit of a free spirit, always on the move, always chasing something new. But when we last spoke, she had gone to Europe to pursue her career in design. I hadn't heard from her since. "Lily," I said, smiling, surprised by the wave of nostalgia that hit me. "Wow, I didn't expect to see you here." She grinned, taking a seat across from me. "Yeah, I've been back in town for a few weeks now. Just got a new gig, doing some freelance work. How are you? I'm good. Really good, actually, I said, though the words felt strange coming out of my mouth. It was the first time in months I had truly felt good, like I was on the right path. We talked for hours, reminiscing about our college days, catching up on the years that had passed. It felt like no time had passed at all. But as we talked, something inside me stirred. Lily's energy was infectious. Her enthusiasm, her zest for life, made me realize how much I had been hiding. I had been holding myself back, afraid of fully embracing the future because of the past. But in that moment, something clicked. I didn't need to be afraid anymore. I didn't need to stay trapped in the past. When she left, she gave me her number. I know you're busy with work, she said, but if you ever want to get out of your head, take some photos, just get away for a while, let me know. I didn't know what to expect from her offer. Part of me wanted to decline. I had my life back together, at least, that's what I told myself. I wasn't looking for distractions. But deep down, I knew I needed something more. I needed to experience life again, not as a man running away from his past, but as someone who was finally ready to embrace the future. I called her the next day. It wasn't a big decision. It wasn't even impulsive. It was just something I knew I had to do. And that one phone call changed everything. From that moment on, my life took an unexpected turn. I found myself reconnecting with someone who reminded me of who I was before everything. Someone who made me feel like I wasn't broken, like I could still be whole again. Someone who didn't need to fix me, but helped me rediscover the parts of myself I thought I had lost. Lily and I spent the next few weeks exploring new places, taking photos, and laughing like we hadn't missed a beat. I started to feel the weight lifting, and I realized that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as far from happiness as I had thought. But with every smile, every photo we took, I couldn't shake the nagging question, was I moving on too quickly? Was this a rebound, or was I truly ready for something new? I didn't have the answer. And maybe I wasn't supposed to. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't scared of the unknown. I was ready to see where it took me. Weeks passed, and though the sharpness of the pain gradually softened, it never fully disappeared. The memory of Harrison lingered like a shadow I couldn't outrun. I kept myself busy with my work, taking on new projects, diving deeper into photography, something I hadn't had time for in years. On the surface, it seemed like I had it all together. I was moving forward, and on the outside, I felt free. But there were moments, those small, fleeting moments, when I'd catch myself in a quiet room, and the weight of the past would hit me all over again. The hardest part wasn't the anger. It wasn't the betrayal. It was the silence. The absence of someone who had been such a constant in my life. But I also knew that silence was my victory. It meant I had let go. I had walked away from the toxic familiarity that had defined so much of my existence. That was my strength. One Sunday afternoon, I was at a cafe in the city, just sitting by the window and watching the world go by. I was in a good place, sipping coffee, reading a book, feeling like life was finally starting to make sense again. And then, just like that, I heard a voice. It was the last voice I expected to hear. Eric? I looked up, my stomach dropping for a second before I recognized her. Lily. She looked different, more polished than the last time I saw her, like she had her life together. But there was something in her eyes that made me feel like we were still the same people we had been when we first met all those years ago. She smiled, a little hesitantly, but there was no mistaking the warmth there. Hey, Eric, she said, taking a seat across from me without asking. I didn't expect to see you here. I couldn't help but smile. Yeah, I come here sometimes. It's good to see you. We talked for a while about life, about everything and nothing. We laughed about old times and shared where we'd been in the years that had passed. It felt comfortable, like no time had passed at all. But then, at some point, the conversation shifted. Lily paused, taking a breath before speaking. Can I ask you something, Eric? I nodded, curious. What's next for you? She asked, her gaze steady. Where do you go from here? I hesitated. The truth was, I didn't know. I had stopped living for the answers, stopped searching for some grand revelation. I was no longer holding my breath, waiting for everything to fall into place. But as Lily's question hung in the air, I realized something. I began slowly, I'm just trying to live. It felt like the most honest answer I'd given in a long time. I wasn't trying to fix anything anymore. I wasn't trying to figure out what came next. I was living for me, and that was enough. Lily smiled, and there was a quiet understanding in her expression. I get that, she said softly. That moment with her, sitting there, felt like the first real step in the journey I'd been avoiding. I wasn't trapped by the past anymore. I wasn't defined by the mistakes I'd made or the things I had lost. I had taken control of my own life. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was in the right place. But as I left the cafe and walked back into the city streets, I realized that this wasn't the end of the story. This wasn't the resolution I had once thought I needed. I wasn't looking for closure anymore. I was simply moving forward. I was allowing myself to breathe again. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel scared. The days that followed were quieter. I spent time with people who brought positivity into my life, those who didn't ask anything from me, but instead gave me the space to just exist. I started embracing the idea that maybe, just maybe, life could be simple again. No more emotional manipulation, no more obligations that left me drained. I was learning how to live for myself and how to say no without guilt. It was a new concept for me, but a liberating one. Lily and I continued to see each other, taking spontaneous trips, capturing photos of landscapes, laughing over meals, talking about things both important and trivial. The more I got to know her, the more I realized how much I had needed someone like her, someone who didn't try to fix me, but simply let me be. I had never understood what it meant to be fully seen by another person, without the weight of expectation. But with Lily, I felt like I could breathe without fear of disappointing her, without worrying about whether I was enough. One weekend, we went on a hiking trip up a mountain I had always wanted to climb. The hike was challenging, but the moment we reached the summit, the view of the sprawling landscape before us felt like a metaphor for my life. I had climbed my own mountain, one that had been full of obstacles and unexpected turns, but I had reached the top. And it wasn't just the view I was admiring. It was the fact that I had done it on my own. I had taken control of my life, and now I was standing at the peak, ready to embrace whatever came next. We spent the night camping under the stars, talking late into the evening about everything that had happened in our lives, the things we had learned, the mistakes we had made. As I lay there, looking up at the sky, I realized something important. I wasn't waiting for something to happen anymore. I wasn't waiting for some grand revelation. I was living in the moment. I was living for me. When I returned home, things felt different. Not in a dramatic way, but in a subtle, almost imperceptible shift. I felt lighter, more sure of myself. I wasn't afraid to make mistakes anymore. I wasn't afraid of what the future held. I had taken back my power, and with it, my sense of self. I knew there were still challenges ahead. There were still moments when doubt crept in. But now, I knew I was ready. Ready to face whatever came next without hesitation. Ready to embrace life on my own terms. And as I walked through the streets of the city, my heart no longer weighed down by past mistakes, by family obligations, or by the fear of disappointing anyone. I realized that I had found what I had been searching for all along: peace. For the first time in my life, I was no longer trying to prove myself to anyone. I was finally enough.